Hi class, welcome to the Chapter 6 and Review Lab Workbook Help video. In this video, we're going to talk about the Chapter 6 and Review Lab, and it's going to be largely some review. So I'm going to skip around a little bit because some of the things in this workbook probably are more difficult for you than others, and some of them are new and some of them aren't. So I will skip around and try to explain accordingly what is happening in this workbook. Remember, for Exam 2, we've covered Chapter 5, Chapter 7, and now Chapter 6. So Exam 2 is comprehensive in nature. And remember, as you're studying, that you don't only have Chapter 5, 6, and 7, but you have other labs going back. So if you haven't taken the time to go back and review things from Exam 1, you're probably going to want to do that before the exam rolls around. Let's get started on this workbook. I'm going to start this workbook on the rates page. The reason I'm going to start it here is I know that in some of the labs you didn't get to this page. So I want to make sure that I spend time explaining what's going on. As we've worked through this course, we've worked with a lot of financial functions, a lot of payment functions, so on and so forth. So this worksheet is designed to emphasize that you know more financial functions, more payment functions than you might think that you know. The instructions say please complete the highlighted boxes with the requested information related to the 4 options of home or car loans. So here, what I want to point out, I'm just correcting my own spelling because it's driving me crazy. But here, I want to point out that there are yellow boxes in each different option. So option 1, we have an interest rate, we have a term, we have a down payment, we have a monthly payment. It's asking for the present value of the car. So present value of the car is going to be a function that we're going to use, not a formula. This one's asking for the term of the loan. It gives us all the other information, doesn't give us the term. This one's asking us for the monthly payment. This one should be the easiest one on the whole worksheet for you. This one's asking for the total interest paid. Basically, you're buying a car. Your annual interest rate is 5.5%. You're financing this car for 5 years. Tell me how much interest you're going to pay. And then tell me the total price of the car from option 4. So that's all it's asking. Here, what it wants to know is, can you figure out the functions that go in here? So I want you to recall something. I want you to remember this PMT function. And I'm going to type it here just so the arguments come up. The payment function asks us for a rate, which we know has to normally be monthly, but has to be in the same time period as the rest of our information. Again, normally monthly for this class, but in the same time period. We also have number of periods, NPER, number of periods, present value, we have future value, and we have type. But the reason I bring this up and the reason I point it out is the payment function has these 3 arguments that we're now used to using all of the time. Well, whoever designed the back end of Excel and started putting these formulas in here for us and these functions in here for us has been very kind to us, because not only did they give us the payment function, but they've also given us rate, number of periods, and present value, which we can also use. So the arguments that are under the payment function are also functions in and of themselves here in Excel. So up here where we're asked for the present value of the car, this is going to be a negative function, just like all of our payment functions. It's going to be present value. The name of this function is present value. It tells you I want to find out the present value, and that's the name of the function, PV, present value. First argument is rate. That's an annual interest rate, so I'm going to divide by 12 because I have a monthly payment. You'll notice annual interest rate, monthly payment. Remember that they all have to be in the same time period. If I have a monthly payment or I need a monthly payment, I need it all in months. Is it possible I could do it all quarterly or all yearly? Of course. Normally, though, we pay things on a monthly basis, so that's why you found us multiplying and dividing by 12. Second argument is number of payments. Here I have a loan for 30 years. Well, it's a 30-year loan, but there are 12 payments in a year, so that one's that 30. Cell B5 times 12 to get my number of periods. And my payment is going to be right here, $1,750. The last 2 arguments, future value and type, you'll see in brackets. They are, in fact, optional. I don't have to put them here, so I'll close my parentheses and press enter. And you'll notice my present value of my car is given to me in that cell. Here for term of the loan, I want the term of the loan in years. So here, again, a negative function, all of our payments are, NPER, number of periods. First argument for number of periods says rate. Again, I have an annual rate and a monthly payment, so I'm going to divide this by 12. I'm going to have my payment, which is going to be $3,000. And I'm going to have my present value. Remember, present value is the price of this house minus the down payment. So the price minus the down payment. I know it's really hard to see that underneath here it says down payment. It's set up exactly the same as the other two. So you can take my word for it, but make sure that you're investigating your data as you go through so you know that that's what that down payment is. Again, future value and type are optional arguments. I don't need them here. And I hit enter. This tells me the number of periods for my loan is 107.33. That's all well and good, but you know, because we just multiplied by 12, or divided by 12, we divided our interest rate by 12, and we have a monthly payment. This 107.33 is number of months, and I need this term of the loan in years. So to get it in years, if I have it in months, I'm just simply going to divide by 12. That should tell me I have 8.944 years. I can make that round up to the nearest year by simply going to my Home tab in my number formatting box, clicking the comma to make it just a regular decimal, and then hiding decimal places. I can round it up to 9. It's actually a little less than 9, but it's nice to look at as a round value, so a 9-year term loan. The next one says, what's the monthly payment? This should be the easiest one on the sheet for you. It's just PMT. Equals minus PMT. Again, annual interest rate is divided by 12. You'll notice as you watch me do this, I'm not absolute referencing anything. I'm not absolute referencing anything in these functions because I'm not dragging my formulas anywhere. I'm not dragging across. I'm not dragging down. If I'm only typing a formula in a box once, absolute referencing isn't necessary. So just remember, I don't have to spend time absolute referencing if I'm not going to drag it anywhere. I'm not going to copy and paste it anywhere. It's just always going to reference these cells. I'm not moving it, so I'm good with no absolute referencing. Number of periods, again, this is years. I'm going to want to multiply the number of years times 12 to get it in months. The present value of my loan, again, is the price of my car minus my down payment. Last two arguments are optional. And my monthly payment, $722.85. Total interest paid. So here we know we have options for interest payments, and I talked about this in a different video. We have IPMT or CUMIPMT. Either we have interest payment or cumulative interest payment. So how do we know which one's which? Interest payment, as you'll recall, breaks the monthly payment down into its interest and principal portion, and cumulative interest tells me the total interest that I'm going to pay over the life of the loan. So here I'm going to have cumulative interest payment, CUMIPMT, cumulative interest payment. My first argument is rate. Again, this one's annual. I have monthly payments. I'm going to take my rate divided by 12. My number of periods times 12. You'll see a pattern emerging here. I have the present value of my loan, which is going to be the price of this car, minus the down payment, which happens to be in cell D25. I have new arguments now. I have start period. Well, start period of a loan is 1. It's always 1. Sometimes we click in a cell. Sometimes we can just type it. The reason we can just type it here is because I'm not dragging it anywhere. So the 1 doesn't need to move. So you'll notice when we do loan amortization tables in other labs or other workbooks that you can click on the period for 1 and drag it down as you go through, and that's very helpful. But here, it's just 1 cell. So I just want my start period and my end period. I want to be the last period of this loan. So here, I want to say the 5 years of the loan times 12, because my last period is going to be the last period or the 60th period of this loan. I could just type 60 if I'm that good at math in my head. Could just type 60, or I can take the term and multiply it out by months. Either way. Type for this loan, we're going to stick with 0. Again, I'm not teaching you the finance part of this, just the Excel part. So we'll stick with a standard loan and press enter. So what's the total price of option 4? If you're going to buy a car that's $30,000, put a $2,000 down payment, pay $750 a month, how much are you actually paying for this car? Well, you're paying the price of the car plus, not equals, but plus the total amount of interest. So you're paying $34,089.95 for this car if you make $750 payments throughout its lifetime. So you can use this worksheet to tell you a lot of different things about a lot of different types of loans, and that's what we designed it for. Now, let's move on. Let's move back to this employee pay workbook. What I want to show you are the directions. The directions say, please use subtotals to show each student's total scholarship by semester. And additionally, please place a pivot table in another tab to show each student's total scholarship by year. Perfect. I'm going to make a copy of this because I know from working with Excel, and you know from doing homework and being in lab and such things, that I can't make a pivot table out of something that has subtotals in it. So I can't put subtotals here and then make a pivot table out of something with subtotals. It doesn't work like that. So instead, I'm going to make a copy of this worksheet. So to do that, I'm going to right click down here on the sheet tab, and I'm going to say move or copy. I'm going to check this box that says create a copy. I get the option to move it to another workbook. I can make a new workbook with it. I can leave it in this workbook that I'm in. Excel would also give me the option to move it to any open workbook on my machine. Right now I don't have any, but if I did, I could move it to a different workbook, which is going to be very, very helpful when you go to work on your project and you have these big files that you're trying to combine. You can move tabs from one workbook to another. So I'm just going to leave it in this workbook, Chapter 6 in Review, create a copy, and I'm going to say OK. It's going to drop it at the beginning. I don't really care where it goes. I'm going to bring it over here and drop it next to employee pay, but not necessary. I just want to have two copies, one for subtotals and one for pivot tables. So I'll go back to this one, and I'm going to right click it again, and I'm going to click rename, and I'm going to do employee pay, and I'm going to do this one subtotals. And then I'm going to right click on employee pay 2, and I'm going to say rename it, and I'm going to say instead of employee pay 2, I'm going to call it pivot table. Just so I know when I go back and study these what I'm looking at here. So for subtotals, it says please use subtotals to show each student's total scholarship by semester. So I need to create subtotals for each student. And then I need to show each total in each semester. What I want to show you first is what you don't want to do. So don't follow along with me right now if you're following along. This is what you don't want to do. I want you to notice that the students are all over here and they're all jumbled up and they are not in any sort of order. My semesters are not in any sort of order. What you don't want to do is just start making subtotals from your data when it looks like this. If you do, this is what happens. And to make a subtotal, you're going to go to the Data tab, and you're going to go over to the Outlines group, and you're going to click Subtotal. And you're going to say, at each change in student, because it says please use subtotal to show each student, so each change in student, use the sum function to add up the amount of scholarship money, and I'm going to hit OK. When I do that, Excel is going to freak out, and it's going to freak out for a minute. The reason that it freaks out, and yours probably freaks out longer than mine, but the reason it's freaking out is because it's going, and every time there is a change in student, it is creating a subtotal. So you will notice, since these students are jumbled like this, student K appears here, student K appears here, but Excel's not smart enough to put those two together because I didn't sort. Now, sometimes you'll have so much data, if you mess this up, you're going to get a blue spinning circle of death or a rainbow spinning circle of death, depending on whether you're PC or Mac. Remember, you can push escape and force Excel to stop doing what it's doing. So if I didn't want it to do this, I would just hit escape. I'm going to go back to subtotal, and I'm going to say remove all subtotals because that's not at all what I wanted to do. So now my subtotals are gone. It's not what I wanted to happen, so if I just want to get rid of it, I go back to subtotal and hit remove. Next, what needs to happen is this. I need to sort this data. So I can click anywhere in this data set, doesn't matter where, don't have to select it all. I can click anywhere in the data set, go up to the Data tab here in the middle of the ribbon and click Sort. I want to sort by student from A to Z, and then I want to add a level. If I'm on a PC, it says Add Level. Here on my Mac, it just says Plus. I want to sort by student, and then I want to sort by semester. I know that I want to sort by student and then by semester because my directions say, please use subtotals to show each student's total scholarship by semester. I sort first by student and then by semester. And I'll click OK. Excuse me. You'll notice that over in my data set now, I have student A followed by these semesters all grouped together. So now this is going to make much prettier subtotals. And I want to show them this way. So I'm going to say insert subtotals at each change in student. Use the sum function to sum the amount of scholarship money. Replace current subtotals, and I'm going to click OK. Now, if I click on these numbers over here, I can see the levels of my outline group. So if I click on number 2, shows me all of the students and just their total scholarship money. Excuse me. So if I want to see it in dollars, I click on column C and go to the home tab and, click the dollar sign, and then it starts to be more readable. But right now we're focused on subtotals. If I click on the 3, it's going to expand all the way out, which is nice. I can scroll down to the bottom of student A and see there is in fact a subtotal here, but I want to see it by semester. So to get that, I'm going to go back to the data tab and add a second level of subtotals. You can't add 2 levels of subtotaling at the same time like you do sort. You have to add them separately. So now I want at each change, okay, so here's what I've done. I don't have the option to change from anything except amount of scholarship money. I'm going to push cancel. The reason for that is I only have column C highlighted here where I was changing it to dollars. I'm going to click back in my data set and go back to subtotal. Now at each change in semester, use the sum function to add up all the scholarship money, and I'm going to uncheck this replace current subtotals. If I don't uncheck this box, it's going to replace my student subtotals and only make them at changes in semester. Well, I want both, so I have to uncheck this replace subtotals box. And I'll click OK. It'll do its thing. Now I have student A's total for fall, total for spring, total for summer, so on and so forth. And if I scroll down, I still see that I have a subtotal for student A. Now I have 4 levels of grouping, so I can click on 3 and get each individual semester total. I can click on 2 and go back to each student total, or get my grand total at level 1. So remember that these are over here. They're very helpful to show you what's happening. Now, the second set of the directions says, please place a pivot table in another tab to show each student's total scholarship by year. So we'll go to the pivot table tab, and we're going to think about this for a minute. Right now, all of the data that I have is about students, it's about semesters, and it's about money. I'm going to go ahead and click on the home tab and make this dollars, just because it'll be easier to look at here in a second. But it wants me to show scholarship by year. I don't have a year. All I have is a semester. So here's what I'm going to want to do. I'm going to right click on column C and I'm going to say insert. It's going to insert a column just to the left of column C, which is now column D, and it's going to allow me to put in the year. The reason I'm going to do this now is because I can't do a text formula inside a pivot table. It's not going to like it. It's not going to let me classify it correctly. I'm going to go ahead and do this in my base data. I'm going to call this column year. In class, we did this where we used the year function to pull out the year from a date. The year function, if I type equals year, if I could spell, or I type equals year, asks me for a serial number. It asks me for a date, because remember, to Excel, dates are numbers. If I click on this, it's not going to recognize this as a number. It says that's a value, not a number. What are you doing to me? I need a number to use this formula. So I run into this problem where I can't use a function I already know to get the year off of here. Now what happens is you have to look at your data. I can sort this easily by semester, and I would be able to do that in a pivot table, but I can't get it to year without this new field. So how am I going to get the year out of the semester field? And you have to start thinking, well, how do I identify the year? In this column for semester, I have a 4-digit year followed by the semester. So I'm going to use a function that you don't know yet, but is very handy. It's called left. And left is going to take a text string and return a number of characters from the left side of that text string. So my text string here is going to be B2, and I want it to give me the first 4 characters in cell B2. When I do that, it's going to give me 2016. Now, I could ask it to give me the first 8 characters if I wanted, and I would get this. I could ask it to give me the first 2 characters, and I would just get 20. Not helpful. I want the first 4 characters of this, but that's the reason I use the left function, and I'm going to double click and send it all the way down. The reason I use the left function is because my date is on the left. There's also a function called right that would give you the ones from the right hand side, which is really nice. There are also other text functions that you can use that will help you. If you go to the formulas tab and you click on text, here's the whole kit and caboodle of formulas that you might want with text. So I have right, I have left, I have lots of different things that I can do. Concatenate is one of my favorites. Substitute is nice. Upper is good. so on and so forth. So we'll use some more of them as we go through the end of the semester. But for now, left is what we need. Now that we have this column for year so that we can sort by year, we're just going to click somewhere in this data set. We're going to go to the Insert tab and we're going to insert a pivot table. Doesn't matter where I am as long as I'm inside the data set. Remember, if I have a blank row or a blank column, it's going to separate and not become part of my pivot table, which is a problem. So remember that you have to go through and make sure that you don't have any blank rows or any blank columns so that your data will be captured correctly. I know that this is my range, A1 to D1012. I know that because I've already looked. If you don't believe me, you can go scroll. And I want to put it on a new worksheet, so I'll click OK. I end up with this pivot table, and the directions say, please place a pivot table in another tab, which is why I said on a new worksheet, to show each student's total scholarship by year. So over here, I want to show each student's scholarship money by year. So I click on students, I click on year, and I click on scholarship money. Now, you can check the boxes, and Excel will try its best to put these down here in this pivot table where you want them to go. Turns out that absolutely is not how I want this to be set up. Turns out I want students to be my rows, and I want years to be my columns so that my students have all of these different columns for each year and a grand total. I could do it a variety of ways. It doesn't really matter. I can click in here and drag out, go to field settings, and click on number so I can change this to currency so that it looks like currency. I click OK a couple times and it brings it back out to numbers. I could take year and I could put it as a row. I could put students as columns. So 2014, that's all the students. So you'll see I can move it around based on what I want to do. I can also filter by things. So if I wanted to filter by semester, let's say I only wanted to see the semesters that were related to fall. I could click on this and I could say, okay, those are the ones that I want. So I'll uncheck spring, uncheck summer, uncheck spring and summer, so on and so forth. If I only want to see fall, I can uncheck all of these boxes and then close this down, and you'll notice all of these numbers have changed. I can go back and I can say clear filter, which will give me all of them, or should give me all of them. Oh, select all will give me all of them, and I go back to the totals that I want. It's a little different on my Mac than my PC, so bear with me. But I can fool around with my pivot table and make it do whatever I want. If I don't want to have a filter, I can just grab that out of the filter pane and drag it back up to the top. It doesn't matter. So I can drag these around until I'm satisfied with what I want my pivot chart to look like. Now, in the instructions, it doesn't say what I want pivot table to look like. It doesn't say. So I just wanted to see students by year. So this is not wrong. This is not wrong. This is not wrong. This is not wrong. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. So whatever looks best to you, students by year. Now this is what most of you would just select. You'd have students down one side and years across. Totally fine. Don't care. If I cared, I would be much more specific, I promise. So here, this next tab, Sales by District, says please create data validation lists in D1 to allow the user to input the month of sales. So in cell D1, I want you to input some data validation. Well, that happens on the Data tab. And I want data validation. I want to create this data validation, and I want to allow items from a list. Well, where is my list? Ignore blank, in cell dropdown, but where is my list? Under source is where I'm going to grab the items for my list. So I can click on this, and I will highlight all the way across these months in this worksheet, months and years in this worksheet. Go back to my drop-down box and say yes, allow the list. There's my source, and click OK. Then you'll notice I get this lovely drop-down box where I can select one. So you'll pick one. The next directions say, additionally, please create a data validation list showing each state in C2. So in C2, I'll do the same thing. The states are all the way over here. So this time, I'm going to do data validation. And I'm again going to say not any value, but a list. And my source of that list is going to be this list of states. I'm not going to grab location, because location is not a state. I don't really want that in my drop-down list, so I will just allow my users to select actual states. I'm going to choose Texas. I know Texas is this row, and I'm going to choose March 2017. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this because what's coming up next is, after creating the data validation, please use a lookup function to return the sales numbers based on the user selection for the list. So, based on the user selections here, put a formula in cell D2 that tells me what the intersection of these are. So you should know by now that if I have something specifying a row and something specifying a column, that's an index match. I'm going to use an index match anytime I have an array of data with lots of rows and lots of columns, and I don't know which row or column I'm going to use at any given point in time. It might move around, so I'm going to use an index match for that. Up until this point, I've told you you could also use a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP instead of an index match if you wanted to. This one is a little bit different. You can't use a VLOOKUP to figure this out. If you try to use a VLOOKUP to figure this one out, you'll realize very quickly that Texas is your lookup value. And look, Texas is in the very most right column. Remember, a VLOOKUP is not going to work if I have to try to look back to the left. That's one of the reasons we're choosing index and match. I'm going to do this quickly. If you need a more drawn out explanation of this, please go to the other videos that we have that walk you through the index match and the full logic. This is about the 4th time we've done it, so I'm going to do it a little more quickly. This one is index, and we'll remember that index, the arguments are the array of the data, the row number, and the column number. So I need to figure out the whole array of the data, the whole data set, what row number I want, what column number I want. So here, first of all, we're going to select all of the data as our array. I'm going to start in cell A3. I'm going to hit Command-Shift over and Command-Shift down. It's Control-Shift if you are on a PC. But I want it to lock that in place. I'm going to press comma so that I don't start clicking and mess up my data array. Once I push comma, you'll notice that dark blue line box around the outside means it's frozen. It is captured. I'm not going to break it by clicking on stuff now. But my row number, I'm going to use a match function for. And my question here to you is, what is dictating what row I look up? Is what row I choose based on the months and the years, or is the row I choose based on location? It's based on location because each row has a different location. So for this match, I'm going to be looking for the location. That's important because it's always going to be row first. And I need to know what to look up. So I want to look up Texas. It's my lookup value. It's what's going to dictate what row I'm on. I'm going to look up cell C2. And where am I going to look it up? I'm going to look it up in Y3, Command-Shift down, all the way to the end of my data. I have to start in Y3 because my index array captures row 3. It's not going to work otherwise. And then I want my match type to be 0 or false because I want an exact match. I want Texas and only Texas. So now my column number is dictated by my date. So here I have another match. If I could hit the right buttons, that would be great. M-A-T-C-H, match. My lookup value here is going to be my date. My lookup array is going to start in A3. It's going to go all the way over to Y3. The reason it starts in A3 is because that's where my index array looked up. And when my index is looking in all of this data set, it needs to count this as column 1. If it doesn't, it's not going to work correctly. So this is column 1. Even though column 1 is never going to be returned, column 2 is never going to be returned, I still have to start there. My match type is again 0 or an exact match. I'll close both my functions and press enter. So you'll notice Texas, March 2017, is in fact that cell that I clicked on. So now let's choose December 2017 and let's find out which location is in row 7. That would be New York. So let's select New York and December 2017. If I get 18,04350, I know my index match is working, and it is. So that worked out. So that's how you do that index and match. The customer discount tab is a little more difficult than other things that we might have worked on. To get started with this, I'm actually going to hide a whole bunch of stuff because I'm going to hide it so it becomes less stuff for you to look at and we can work through the logic. So I'm going to highlight from column C over to column G. And again, it's just because I've looked at this data and I know what's here. If so I can hide them. I'm going to highlight the columns by clicking on their names and click hide. They're not going to go anywhere. They're just hidden. I'm also going to hide, I need column J. I'm also going to hide column K all the way over to column P, and I'm going to click hide here. So that like shrinks my directions box down, but that's no big deal. We'll just drag it over here and make it bigger. The reason I hid this data is so when I'm writing these if statements that we're about to do, it's not nearly as confusing to you. So I want to make it as simple as possible. So it says, please calculate the discount given to each customer. Please show the discount percentage in column Q. So show the discount percentage in column Q. Discounts are based on the following criteria. Restaurant customers who've been customers for more than 5 years receive 15% off. I know right now that I need to know how long somebody has been a customer. I'm going to insert a column right here. Click on the J to highlight the whole column, and I'm going to hit insert. And I'm going to call this one years as a customer. Could you do this inside your if statement? Absolutely you could, but I'm not going to because that's just one more step that I might mess up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put today's date up here in this yellow box, which is what we do. I'm going to figure out years as a customer. So years as a customer, we know by now we get by a function called year frac. And year frac is going to be the start date. So the date of first purchase, start date. The end date is going to be today, and I'm going to absolute reference today. I'm going to absolute reference today because as I drag this down through this table, I want the end date to always be today. So years as a customer, and I'm going to go ahead and make this closer to a whole number so that I know I don't have to read all those decimal places. Again, not necessary. But what I'm going to do, I'm also going to color this some light shade of yellow so you know that I created this column. It wasn't here to start with. So this is years as a customer, and I'm going to use it to my advantage here. So years as a customer, guys, I'm just making it more readable so that you know what I have done. So I'm wrapping text and doing those things just so you can see what this data is. But anyway, so the discount given is based on the following factors. Restaurant customers who've been customers for more than 5 years will receive 15% off. Retail customers who've been customers for more than 5 years will receive 20% off. All other customers will receive 5% off. Show the total savings in column S. Well, it's column T now because I moved it over one when I inserted a column, but that's okay. So the discount given is based on this criteria. I want you to think through this with me. I want you to think about how many outcomes there are. In this column, there are going to be a certain number of outcomes. How many outcomes will there be? Well, it will either say 15%, or it will say 20%, or it will say 5%. So there are, in fact, 3 outcomes. There are 3 outcomes, which means I have 2 if statements. I'm always going to have the number of if statements equals the number of outcomes minus 1. So here I'm going to have 2. The first one of my if statements is going to tell me who receives a 15% discount. So people receive a 15% discount if they are restaurant customers who've been here longer than 5 years. So they get 15% if they are restaurant customers, their type is restaurant, and they've been here for more than 5 years. So to a computer, that's an if and, because I need 2 things to be true. So I need them to be restaurant, so type equals restaurant, and yes, you must spell it correctly, restaurant, and years as a customer greater than 5. If both of those things are true, we've established they get a 15% discount. You can type 0.015. You can also type 15%. I don't care. They'll both work exactly the same. For ease of reading, I'll type 15%. If they're not a restaurant customer who's been here for more than 5 years, how much of a discount do they get now? Instinctively, you probably thought 20, but 20 is not the answer. It still depends. They could still get 20, or they could still get 20, or they could get 5. Sorry, that was clicking, and I'm not allowed to click until I'm done with my formula. So that's why I got that error message. So they could still get 20, or they could still get 5, which tells me my value if false has another if. I like to start at the top, and I like to work my way to the bottom in these scenarios. So now I'm going to do the 20% reading from the top of the instructions down, I'm going to go with 20%. So if there are two criteria for this one as well. So if the type equals this time retail and the number of years is greater than 5, if both of those are true, these people receive a 20% discount. That just reminded me, that says 0.15%. I need it to be truly 15%, so I'm going to go back and take that out. If the value is false now, if they don't get 15 and they don't get 20, now I have 5% as my leftover, and I will close both sets of my parentheses and press enter. This retail customer has been here more than 5 years, so they should get 20%. This distributor person gets 5%. This restaurant person who's been here less than 5 years gets 5%. The restaurant person with more than 5 years gets 15%. My formula is working. That's beautiful. I can click on it and make it a percentage by clicking on column R, pressing the percentage button on the home tab there in my number formatting pane. And then the total savings are going to be the discount given times the total sales for the year. And I'll just copy that down as well. And that's how you work this problem. So again, I hit a lot of stuff. You don't need to. You don't actually need this today up here. It just makes the formula less convoluted. The last thing in this workbook is going to be this budget. In this budget, it says Sue is trying to determine what prices to charge at her bakery and what income will be associated with selling different numbers of cupcakes at different prices. So Sue has a bakery. She needs to know how much money she's going to make, and she needs to know how to price her cupcakes. So Sue is going to sell a certain number of cupcakes. They're going to cost her that much. She's going to sell them for $4.25. It tells us about percentages of card sales, so on and so forth. Tells us about her fixed cost, tells us about her variable cost, tells us about her net profit. Net income, you'll see, is number of cupcakes times the sales price. You'll see it's a formula over here. Variable cost is going to be the cost of goods sold plus the credit card processing fees. The cost of goods sold is going to be the cost times the number of cupcakes sold. So all of these are formulas as we move down. I can push Control tilde and make it show me which boxes are formulas, which is sometimes helpful to understand what's happening. So you need to determine what's happening in Sue's Bakery Budget part of this worksheet where all the inputs are for the 1 variable and 2 variable tables to make sense. The first thing it asks us is determine the number of cupcakes Sue needs to sell to break even. Net profit equal to 0. For this, assume that the sales price for a cupcake is $4.25 and the cost is 75 cents. That's just there in case you make a mistake and you change it. It wants you to be able to put it back. So it wants us to figure out her break even. Well, we figure out her break even with the what if analysis goal seek. So we want to set cell B5, not cell B5. We want to set net profit, so cell B29. We want to set that equal to 0 by changing the number of cupcakes Sue sells. So we want to make her net profit 0 to find her break even by changing the number of cupcakes she sells. And we'll click OK, and it'll do some calculation and tell us she needs to sell 245.32 cupcakes or 246 cupcakes to break even. Okay. Next, Sue would like to calculate her total income, total variable costs, and net profit will be if she sells between 100 and 1,000 cupcakes. She'd like to know at every 50 cupcake interval. So this begs the question, does she want to use a 1 variable data table or a 2 variable data table? And that depends. How many variables does Sue have in this situation? Well, she wants to vary her number of cupcakes, 1 variable, and she wants to calculate 3 things. So 1 variable, 3 formulas is a 1 variable data table. So we'll set it up the easiest way I know how. We will start with the formulas. So here we want to calculate total income. Set that equal to total income. We're going to set this equal to total variable cost, total variable cost, and this one equal to net profit. Now, I've showed you this in the past. I'll show you one time here. I can mask this to make this say net profit instead of showing 0. To do that, I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to go to More Number Formats. I'm going to click on Custom. And here in this garbled up mess, I'm going to instead type net profit in quotation marks so that it will come out saying net profit. There's still a formula under here. It just now is masked as net profit. You can do that. It's very helpful for your users if you're able to do that. If you need more instruction on how to do that, It's in the Chapter 6 review video. So the other thing on our data table is those are the three things we want to calculate, but we have one variable. So we're changing the number of cupcakes from 100 to 1,000 at 50 cupcake intervals. Excel needs to know the interval that we need to change at, so we're going to have to type 150, and we're going to drag that down to be 1,000. To create this data table, what the data table is going to do is it's going to take this 100 cupcakes. It's going to plug in 100 cupcakes right here. When it does that, it's going to recalculate total income, variable costs, and net profit. So right now, 1,042, 242, and 0. If I change it to 100, it's going to recalculate those. So that's what this is going to do. It's going to plug in 100 and then 150 and then so on and so forth, and it's going to capture the data that happens in there. So I'm going to go back to my break even just so you can see it happen. To make it calculate all of these things, I'm going to highlight this one variable data table, not include this header row right here. I'm just going to capture all of this data. I'm going to go to the data tab. I'm going to click on what if analysis, and I'm going to say this time I have a data table. This data table box is going to pop up, and it's going to say, do you have a row input cell or a column input cell? Here's what it's asking. Are all of your variables in a single column, or are they in a single row? All of your variables currently are in a single column. So our column input cell is going to be whatever is represented in the budget by these changing variables. So here these changing variables relate to number of cupcakes sold. So my column input cell is going to be units of cupcakes sold, and I'll click OK. If you remember correctly, these were the numbers we got by changing to 100 and 150 for net profit, so we know that that's working. The last thing Sue wants is to change the price of her cupcakes. She'd like to see how changing the price as well as the number of cupcakes sold affect her net profit. She'd like to determine this for the range of cupcakes, same range of cupcakes sold for the prices $2.75 to $6 at every 25-cent interval. So she wants to do the same range. I'm going to Command Copy and Command Paste, Command C and Command V over here. Same number of cupcakes, but she wants to see the price, changing price as well. So $2.75, $3, and that's going to give me a 25-cent interval. I can highlight both of these, not click on this one and drag this box over. That doesn't work. But highlight both of these, grab the fill handle, and drag to make that go to $6. If you don't highlight both of them and drag, it doesn't work. Be careful when you start grabbing your fill handle. This two variable data table is able to calculate one formula. Two variable data tables can calculate one formula. One variable data tables can calculate multiple formulas. Two variable data tables can calculate one formula. This one asks for changing the price, changing the number of cupcakes affect net profit. The one formula here is net profit. So I'm going to put the formula there, highlight the whole data table, including all the changing prices and all the changing number of cupcakes. I'll go back to the data tab, click the what if analysis, select data table. This time in my single row, my variable changing relates to price. So my row input cell is going to be sales price. And my column input cell is again going to be number of cupcakes because that's the variable changing in my column. And I'll click OK. Then you will notice that Sue's break even, if the price of her cupcakes is $4.25, her break even is somewhere between 200 and 250 cupcakes. We know that is in fact true. It is 245 cupcakes. So this data table makes sense and we have done it correctly. Hopefully this Chapter 6 and review file helps you. If you have questions, please let me know.